Welcome to another episode of Sounds Reasonable. I'm your host, Dr. Brad, and I am joined in the production of our weekly show by Tim, Tracy, and Abby. We are all members of the Free Thought community, and our Sounds Reasonable website can be found on Facebook. Do you experience frequent irrational thoughts, a pervasive belief in a divine skydance, an insatiable urge to read horoscopes, perform spells, speak in tongues, or pray? Fortunately, you are now listening to the cure for these ailments. Sounds Reasonable. This show is dedicated to bringing you, the listener, the latest news in free thought, science, logic and reason, and politics and religion. And of course, we encourage you to share your thoughts with us after every episode by posting comments and asking questions on our Facebook page. What is free thought? What does it mean to be a free thinker? The dictionary definition is a person who forms opinions about religion based on reason, independent of tradition, authority, or established belief. Here's Christopher Hitchens' working definition. Our belief is not a belief. Our principles are not a faith. We do not rely solely upon science and reason because these are necessary rather than sufficient factors. But we distrust anything that contradicts science or outrages reason. We may differ on many things, but what we respect is free inquiry, open-mindedness, and the pursuit of ideas for their own sake. We will now move on to our science news segment, and remember that the scientific mind is one that allows its perceptions of reality to be constrained by good evidence and good argument. Hey guys, it's time to celebrate a very important scientific discovery because today marks National DNA Day. In fact, we should say International DNA Day because this is not celebrated just in the United States. According to the National Human Genome Research Institute, the occasion commemorates two things: the discovery of the DNA's double helix structure on April 25th, 1953. And for those of you that would actually like to read the original paper that appeared in the scientific journal Nature on that day, April 25th, 1953. And secondly, the completion of the Human Genome Project in 2003. Now, the completion of the mapping of the human genome transformed research, the National Day calendar said, and the occasion is an excellent time for people from different walks of life to learn more about DNA, genetics, and genomics. Quote, the goal of National DNA Day is to offer students, teachers, and the public an opportunity to learn about and celebrate the latest advances in genomic research and explore how those advances might impact their lives. The history of the discovery of DNA structure is also a fascinating and a very human story. Abby has more for us, so Abby, it's all yours.
All right, well, hello everyone. And any of you probably have a decent idea of this story as well, so feel free to jump in as needed. But basically the story basically starts with Watson and Crick. And I hate to say that, but that's what everybody remembers is Watson and Crick and the structure of DNA. And that's what Brad was talking about in the 1953 Nature article. And that is free to read online. So you can just Google it. It's like a page long. It's a super easy read. But I'll just share my screen and share a little bit about what I know about the story. All right. So basically 1953 is when the Nature article was published, and it only took them a couple of years of work because they took a lot of other people's work to come up with their structure, and it was a model that they came up with. Now, James Watson was not a chemist. He was a zoologist as far as his training goes. That's what his doctorate was in. And then Crick was a biophysicist, so he had some background And they had hypothesized that DNA would be a helix, and some stories or some scientists had already had ideas about that, but they were the ones that kind of put all the puzzle pieces together. And so what they did is they made a model, and you can see this on the screen, them posing with their model of metal and wood. And like I said, different pieces of information were put together for them to create this model. So there had already been evidence that DNA was the molecule that was responsible for inheritance of traits. And so previously they had thought like proteins and things like that, but a lot of people had worked on DNA and realized that was in fact what was carrying the hereditary material from generation to generation. So knowledge was already in place about DNA itself, that it had a sugar phosphate background, that it had these pairs of nucleotides. So we might have heard before A's and T's and C's and G's paired together. And I kind of skipped this slide, but that was actually prior to them. And Shargoff was a guy that worked on this, and he, although didn't know about DNA being such an important molecule at the time, he was the one that kind of figured out that adenine and thymine had equal amounts in DNA. And so that's where they came up with the idea that they were actually paired or bonded together with hydrogen bonds. So then they did find out that DNA would be double-stranded, and it's a double helix, as they say. So it's kind of like a twisted ladder with these paired nitrogen bases. But they never would have been able to come up with this if it wasn't for the work of Rosalind Franklin. And today, I mean, I think most teachers try to include her in the discussion of the structure of DNA, but for a long time she was overlooked. In fact, how Watson, Crick, and even Wilkins were awarded the Nobel Prize for the structure of DNA. She actually was not. She was not included, and they, you know, there's lots of excuses why she wasn't included. One was that she died early of cancer, probably due to her work with X-rays and radiation. And so there's a rule that you cannot be awarded the Nobel Prize posthumously. So, I mean, that's one excuse, although there's reasons why that's not really a valid reason. But basically Wilkins was the one, his lab was kind of the one that was doing a lot of the X-ray crystallography. And what that is basically shooting X-rays at crystallized DNA and other biological molecules, and then looking at the way that they diffract and having a picture of it. And so to most of us, if we saw this, we probably wouldn't think anything of it. We would just see a picture and it looks meaningless. But to those who are trained, it made sense that DNA is in a double helix pattern. So this picture is known as photo 51. And photo 51 is pretty famous. Today, it was even in the Nature article published by Watson and Crick. And this picture was done by Rosalind Franklin, and I think it was her student, Ray Gosling, were the ones that took this photo. And again, to the untrained eye, we might not think anything of it, but they knew, and Franklin knew that this was an important photo and that this did suggest the double helix pattern of DNA. However, she was not the kind of person to go ahead and just, you know, publish this without more evidence. And so she kind of held back on showing this and publishing it herself. Well, Watson and Crick were able to get a hold of this photo, probably with help of Wilkins, as the story goes, Maurice Wilkins. And this was without her permission. So a pretty big instance of basically putting women on the back burner in science. So she wasn't given a lot of credit for her work Now, like I said, most teachers do talk about her and recognize her as presenting this information, but at the time she really wasn't recognized. Watson and Crick do mention her in the article at the very end. It's like one sentence saying, oh, and we need to thank Wilkins, Franklin, and others for help with this information. But again, she wasn't really seen as someone who gave a lot of background or had anything to give. So after this article was published, it was a really big deal. People kind of started thinking, wow, this really opens up the world in a whole new way, because once we understood that DNA is what carries traits on from generation to generation, that opens up, what does it mean? Can we use it to enhance organisms? Can we use it to help with genetic disease? Can we use it to help with cancer, etc.? So I mean, there's a whole list of things that it opened our eyes to as scientists. And then today, I mean, like Brad had mentioned, the Human Genome Project that was put out or published, I guess, finished in 2003. And we were talking previously, I don't remember how many years it took, but I mean, it was 6, 7, 8 years for them to complete the first full genome sequencing of a human. And now it's like that kind of stuff kind of happens all the time. It's so much faster. The technology has increased over time, and now we can use it for all sorts of things. And I'll just kind of list off, this is from genome.gov, and they mention 15 ways that understanding and be able to sequence the human genome has helped humanity or society. One was just understanding the variation within people or within organisms. Number 2 was understanding cancer and then being able to treat cancer at the DNA level, and then hopefully save people a lot of pain and suffering. A lot of people are into genealogy these days, so understanding your origins, in a sense of human evolution, but also in the sense of where did your ancestors come from? Where did people migrate to? How are you related to other people in the world? Number 4 was agriculture. And so those of us, especially living in the Midwest, are pretty aware of how understanding the genetics has influenced agriculture. A couple of ways. Most of the food that we eat today is genetically modified. And you say what you will about that, but we help feed the world with genetically modified crops, and there's no evidence that there's anything harmful about them. Evolution itself, so understanding life and how it originated, how it's evolved over the past 4 billion years. Understanding genetic disease, so especially inherited genetic disorders, and then hopefully being able to treat those or again help people from a lot of pain and suffering. Using targeted medicine, and so understanding someone's DNA and how we can use specific medicines to treat specific diseases based on what your DNA says about you, or what it is coding for. Looking at prenatal testing, and so now we have blood tests that you can do as a pregnant woman to look for some of those genetic disorders early in a pregnancy. For those mothers out there, I mean, it's 15, 16 weeks, and you're able to get a simple blood test that can tell you whether there is a high risk of certain genetic disorders within the fetus. Forensics, so understanding if there's DNA evidence, who has committed a crime, and then being able to use that as evidence in court. This has been a huge breakthrough for things like sexual assault, both getting people out of prison because there was proof that they really had no part in it, and then also getting the right people behind bars. And then something that we had talked about before, microbiomes, and how understanding our microbiomes can help with understanding how that's linked to things like anxiety and depression. And so we looked at that even in a previous podcast. We had looked at that. Obviously there's a ton more. We have like 23andMe and direct to consumer genomic testing, genome editing. So using things like CRISPR, which we've also mentioned before, to actually edit the genome. And that's where a lot of our genetically modified crops come from. And then, just understanding basically socially where we fall within the grand scheme of society and organisms on the planet. So understanding our relatedness with other things. Okay, I think I've probably talked a lot. Does anybody have any questions? Or, I'm sure there's things that you guys would like to add that I did not think about or did not mention.
Yeah, so on photo 51, I don't want to come across as us saying that, well, Watson and Crick were crooks. Because Rosalind Franklin actually did show photo 51 in a public seminar.
Oh, okay.
And so Watson actually got his first look at it there, but he wasn't a good note taker. And so he did not get the sketch that he made of it down very well. And so they had trouble making out exactly what it was. So it wasn't until he accidentally, at least that's how it's portrayed from time to time anyway, got a second look at it on Maurice Wilkins' desk. So that's the putting photo 51 in a little bit of context where we don't outright accuse Watson and Crick of stealing that information. Then when Rosalind Franklin was writing up her work, she had the unfortunate happenstance that she was studying the A form of DNA. And if she had studied the B form, she would have gotten it. I have no doubt because she was an excellent biochemist. Mm-hmm. Very well respected, in other parts of Europe. Her reputation wasn't appreciated fully in England, where she was doing this work with Raymond Gosling, as you mentioned. But anyway, it's unfortunate that she had studied the A form, because the A form does not show a helix. It's more dehydrated than the B form. And so what's being shown here with photo 51 is a photograph of the B form, but she chose to write up the A form first, and as a result, she missed. The major thing that she missed was the anti-parallel nature of the strands. So that was the major thing that she would have gotten from the B form that she didn't get from the A form. So she didn't pick that up. And of course, Linus Pauling was the other, shall we say, competitor that was after the structure of DNA at that time. And he had solved some very complex protein structures from X-ray diffraction earlier, and so they were very worried about Linus Pauling getting the structure before they did. But Linus Pauling ended up getting egg on his face pretty good because he published a paper in which he described a triple helix as opposed to a double helix, and of course that was completely wrong. And so when it came down to it, Watson and Crick were pretty lucky. But at the same time, one aspect of scientific research that oftentimes gets overlooked is this. Scientific research often consists of seeing what everyone else has seen, but thinking what no one else has thought. And that's kind of where Watson and Crick got lucky. I mean, they managed to put together a bunch of information that was already out there. Granted, they didn't do a whole lot of work themselves to derive the experimental information they used, but they were able to put together the various information that was out there, and then through model building, they were able to come up with a structure. So that's my 2 cents worth on it. So anything else, Tim?
Well, I think a lot of maybe some of the controversy actually was because of the book that Watson wrote, and how maybe how he did not, originally it was going to be published over Harvard Press, but when they sent manuscripts out to everybody involved, there was some things they didn't like about it as far as how he was portraying Rosalind Franklin. I think that's some of the controversy there as well in his book, how he was portraying her. So Harvard Press didn't publish it. Actually, it was published on the Popular Press because of that, some of that. So
yeah, have you read it, Tim?
I've not all, but
I read it way back when I was in Doug Lund's genetics class.
okay.
So that was a long time ago. And unfortunately, I didn't keep it. I don't know what happened to my copy of it, but at some point I should reread it now that I can put it into better perspective. Perspective as an undergraduate student isn't the best, I suppose.
And then the other thing I want to mention is just amazing how, like Abby, as you mentioned at the time, they did have evidence. Avery and his colleagues had evidence that DNA was causing the transformation of the pneumococcus bacteria from the non-disease
mouse study.
Yeah, and then and about the same time that Watson and Crick then figured out the structure is when Hershey and Chase did their experiments with the bacteriophages to show that DNA was being passed on there. And of course that all started in the 30s with Griffith and his work with the pneumococcus, and showing that you could just add these heat-killed the disease-causing strain to live strain, and that would cause a transformation, which he would be considered the father of modern biotechnology, where you could just add DNA and it gets into bacteria. So
yeah, let's not forget Nebraska's own George Beadle.
Right. That's right.
So coming up with the one gene, one protein hypothesis, or one gene, one enzyme, I guess is what he actually called it at the time. Which of course enzymes now we can't say that anymore. Enzymes used to only be proteins.
Yeah.
And now we know that RNA molecules can also function as enzymes.
Yeah. Well,
it kind of opens up the world of RNA for that. Yeah. That's where I took botany, was at the Beadle Center and at UNL. So they have one of the newer buildings at UNL, and its main purpose is biotechnology or in teaching.
And interestingly enough, were you at this, Tim? When Watson dedicated the Beadle Center?
Yeah. And Gene
I was at that lecture.
Lecture, and then Gene and I got to actually meet him personally when at the Beadle Center. We got to go up, shake his hand, and talk to him a little bit.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of interesting now that, because of the controversy that he has kind of been a part of over the last, 20 years, or well, probably more than that. And some of the things that he has said has really taken away a lot of his
credibility as well.
Yeah, I think he sold his Nobel Prize even for money. I read at one point in time, because a lot of his honors got stripped away because of the things that he was saying that were both racist and sexist. Yeah. So
So yeah, like I said in the intro, it's a very human story, filled with flaws, mistakes, and at the same time, eureka's. So So yeah, it's a fascinating story, and Abby, thanks so very much for relaying that to us. So we'll be right back with more Sounds Reasonable after this short break.
All alive. The devil's in the detail, lingered inside. Oh, a holy crime. But how can I hide you without an alibi? It's a lover's fight without an alibi. You took my innocence. I can't wait no longer. I'm playing with the monsters. Everything that brought me alive. Going wrong like nonsense. Playing with the monsters. They brought me alive, but got no alibi. It's a lover's fight without an alibi. You took my innocence without an alibi.
And we're back with more Sounds Reasonable on Sunday, April 25th, 2021. When it comes to domestic terrorism, we don't typically think of it as occurring routinely in the streets of American cities. We especially don't think of it as being sponsored as the result of legislation by governors of our states. However, two recent bills, one passed in Florida, the other passed in Oklahoma, do just that. The story I'm going to relay today comes from the Rachel Maddow Show and was reported by the Raw Story, authored by Sarah K. Burris on April 21st of this year, and is titled, Maddow, Al-Qaeda used to instruct terrorists to ram their cars into crowds, just like GOP bills now legalize. Oklahoma and Florida legislatures have legalized running a car into a crowd of people if one feels, quote, threatened. It's being called a get out of jail free card for white supremacists and terrorists who want to commit murder during a Black Lives Matter rally. Ironically, Oklahoma experienced an incident in which a disgruntled student plowed into a crowd of people at the homecoming parade in 2015, killing 2 people. Oklahoma was also home to a large armed Tea Party rallies that could now be targeted thanks to the law. There are generally much larger and louder protests from the right wing in Oklahoma than from Black Lives Matter protests. If I can get the page. In Florida, they've essentially nullified the right to assemble when it comes to Confederate statues, which will likely get the law thrown off the books. Still, an all-white Republican group of lawmakers cheered on the freedom they now have to kill Black Lives Matter activists. Speaking to Florida State Senator Chevron Jones, Maddow asked about the specifics of the bill, which he noted are flatly unconstitutional. But it was her comparison that brought in the following striking comparison. One of the things that is, I think so, that is the most shocking about this bill, and we saw that it made the headline in the New York Times today, is this idea that this Republican bill and now state law in Florida singles out people who use their cars to run over protesters for a specially designated form of immunity, she began. I mean, you know, the freaking Al-Qaeda magazine, when it used to exist, used to advise Al-Qaeda adherents that a great way to terrorize lots of Americans is to use a readily available large tool, namely a car or a truck, to run down Americans as a way of committing terrorist attacks in this country. By putting such a spotlight on that and singling it out for immunity, are there concerns this is creating a clear and present current public safety threat around that type of way of hurting people? Jones agreed, explaining that it happened in Miami, Florida last year during a George Floyd demonstration, where someone drove their car into a crowd. Under the new law, killing someone there would be legal. And let's be extremely clear that the governor has created a piece of legislation that no one has asked for, said Jones. Instead of the governor doing what needs to be done to protect the lives of Black people within this state, who is included within the 22 million people in the state of Florida, to begin to create these penalties that do nothing but create more individuals in our criminal justice system and to continue to clog up our jails. So it does nothing. So there's the state of affairs that our most prejudice or racial governors in the United States have now stooped to, allowing people to literally kill with impunity if they quote unquote feel threatened by a particular protest. Your thoughts?
Well, I am extremely threatened by anti-abortion protesters, so I guess when I go to Oklahoma, I'll be good.
Exactly.
I can't believe this is real.
I know.
I know.
Is that the fake news story, or is this?
Yeah, I wish it were fake.
I know. It's just insane.
Like how is that like? I just don't. I can't even wrap my head around it. It's crazy.
Then of course, as you said, Brad, definitely unconstitutional.
Yeah, I mean it's almost certainly going to get struck down.
Well,
no pun intended, by the way.
Yeah, it's just.
Tracy, we're not hearing you.
You're muted.
She's not muted. Can't.
No, it doesn't show her being
Oh,
muted.
no, it doesn't.
Wonder if her sound's working.
I don't know.
I still think, like, how can that be real? Like, how could someone actually introduce that legislation? Like,
Well,
that's
and Oklahoma had to go through they have the two bodies, right? Their
are they by
Congress
camera?
and their,
So does Florida. Yeah,
yeah, so is Florida. Yeah, I guess.
Florida also has that.
Yeah, they had to go through both houses.
In fact, every state but Nebraska has it, as I recall.
Yeah, you're right. So
We're the only unicameral, I think.
How did
Although I
that
think
go
maybe New
through?
Hampshire had it. New Hampshire has unicameral. I think one of those small New England states also is unicameral, if I remember right. But anyway.
yeah, it's just crazy,
I have to look into this a little bit.
bizarre world.
Tracy, I hope you're able to get your sound fixed here. Yeah, go ahead and restart or
Yeah,
something.
start back up. Yeah.
So the just incredible part of this, this is where, to me, of course it's outrageous, but also it's incredibly short-sighted, because I think what the person that Rachel was interviewing, the point she was trying to make was, well, now all Al-Qaeda would have to do is decide that they're going to ram into people protesting, and they just got away with a terrorist act.
Right. Exactly.
That for free. I mean, there's going to be no consequences, no issue there. So just unbelievable.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was just reading on Reuters about this situation, and they said basically that it is true some states are introducing this, but it's supposed to be only give immunity if it's an accidental running over of a protester that's blocking traffic.
Oh,
But
well,
I
my,
mean,
my foot got stuck on the accelerator.
yeah, but how could you
It
like,
was an accident.
yeah, how could you prove whether that was intentional or accidental? Like, that's gonna be every reason, like, I didn't mean to run
People
over
get-
that person.
People get charged with vehicular homicide all the time, even though it was an accident. So,
But I thought the Oklahoma bill, if you felt threatened though, right? I mean, you can.
yeah, if you just feel threatened.
Yeah, so.
I haven't seen that one yet come up. There's, though I haven't seen the one specifically about Oklahoma. It did mention the Florida one, but that's pretty new, so this might not be covering that one.
Yeah, so, and again, the same way, if you have the right-wing extremist out protesting and toting guns, then I guess you run a risk getting shot running over them, but you could plow into them. Freddie, right.
Mm.
It looks like Missouri's introducing legislation as well.
Yeah, what a surprise.
Yeah, surprise.
Yes, speaking of Missouri, the only senator that voted against the hate crimes bill against Asian Americans was Josh Hawley of Missouri. So it's not surprising that was that we'd see legislation like that in Missouri. Just unbelievable. But of course, we already saw it in action in Charlottesville, Virginia, right? That one girl was killed by somebody ramming his car into.
Just drove through the protesters.
Yeah, in a group of protesters.
Man, I mean, but honestly, DeSantis is such an idiot.
Yeah, he is.
And yeah, it does say. So the Florida one, he said they're protecting drivers who kill or injure protesters if they're, quote, fleeing for safety from a mob. So, I mean, again, like, how is that something you can hold up in court? Like, that's all you have to say is like, like Tim said, I was afraid for my life. And then I killed some people by running over them. Like I mean, that's just complete bullshit. How can you get away with that?
Exactly. Tracy, you're still muted.
Unmute.
Yes, we can. Go ahead, make your comment.
Yes, I rebooted. Okay. I don't remember what I was going to say, so.
Okay, well.
It was
anyway,
good though. It was good. I remember that part.
Sure.
It was a very good comment.
Yeah.
You think
Good
Pete
point.
Ricketts will introduce that before he leaves office?
Well,
next year?
Yeah, you got the.
Oh, I know what I was going to say. I'm from Oklahoma, and that's where I'm.
Oop, you just cut out again,
Lost
Tracy.
you.
Darn it.
We can't hear
I'm
you
from
cussing.
Oklahoma, and
Can't hear you cussing, Tracy. I can read your lips.
Well, we'll go ahead and take our next break and try to get Tracy connected here. So we'll be right back with some more Sounds Reasonable.
Messing with my head again. You had your heart set on me, but these feels, they come and go, and they come so easily. Tell me what it is about you that I can't forget, but you're breaking down my walls again just to set me free. Why do I, baby, why do I do I love the touch but never love the feeling? Why do I, baby, why do I love the way you are but always leave me? Why do I, baby, why do I love the touch but never love the feeling?
And we're back with more Sounds Reasonable. One of the a priori principles of Supreme Court rulings is that to overturn precedents, there must be extraordinary circumstances for that to happen. However, now that the SCOTUS composition is 6-3 conservative, with at least one being off the charts conservative, why worry about precedent? Tim has the story for us. So Tim, what is going on with our legal system these days?
Well, thanks, Dr. Brad, for the intro. And I don't know this. Well, we'll discuss what this may mean down the road. My story today comes to us from Raw Story, written by David Bashad. It actually reads like Bad Ash, but I think it's Bashad. And it's titled Justice Sonia
Sotomayor.
Yeah, thank you. Sotomayor rips Brett Kavanaugh with a warning. So the U.S. Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor delivered a strong warning to the American people in a strong rebuke of Justice Brett Kavanaugh and the newest far right-wing justices on the Trump-shaped conservative majority court in a blistering but brilliant dissent handed down last Thursday. Justice Sotomayor warned this newly constructed court, unevenly weighed with 6 justices ranging from highly conservative to far right-wing religious extremists, is quote, willing to overturn precedent without even acknowledging it is doing so, much less providing any special justification. That warning is similar to those posted by legal experts from the left who were extremely opposed to the then President Donald Trump's final Supreme Court nominee, Amy Coney Barrett. Justice Barrett's judicial opinions made clear that she will not honor precedent, known as stare decisis. Without that legal guardrail, many decidedly settled law targets of conservatives from the right to choose an abortion to the right to marry could be struck down by the Trump court. The case Justice Sotomayor used to deliver her warning and her criticism of Justice Kavanaugh is Jones versus Mississippi. It centers on a 15-year-old boy who murdered his grandfather, claimed self-defense, and was sentenced to life in prison. The U.S. Supreme Court has ruled life in prison for minors convicted of non-homicide crimes constitutes cruel and unusual punishment unless that minor has been found to be incorrigible and unable to be rehabilitated. And that's the ACLU's position, regardless of the type of crime. Life imprisonment for minors is cruel and unusual no matter what. But on last Thursday, Justice Kavanaugh, who himself has a history of disturbing acts in college, as his confirmation hearing provided, wrote a 6-3 majority opinion in which he upheld the lower court ruling that the defendant was rightly sentenced to life in prison, despite no finding of whether or not he was able to be rehabilitated. Quote, how long this court's respect for stare decisis has sunk. How low has it sunk? Justice Sotomayor warned. Not long ago, the doctrine was recognized as a pillar of the rule of law, critical to keep the scale of justice even and steady, and not liable to waver with every new judge's opinion, she wrote, citing Kavanaugh's own opinion in a previous ruling. quote, now it seems the court is willing to overrule precedent without even acknowledging it is doing so, much less providing any special justification. It is hard to see now how that approach is founded in the law rather than in the proclivities, which means the presence or inclination of individuals. She added again, using Kavanaugh's own words against him. And so he had a ruling where he discussed these exact same things, or a dissent ruling, which discussed these exact same things. She called the ruling a contortion of previous rulings and writes, quote, as this court has consistently reiterated, a departure from precedent demands special justification. The quote, the court offers no such justification today, nor could it, she charged. Instead of addressing these factors, the court simply rewrites Miller and Montgomery, she observes, naming the two cases that provided the precedent for today's ruling, effectively overrules. To say that the court now wishes that they had said, to say what the court now wishes that they had said, and then denies that it has done any such thing, unquote. State's legal expert, Mark Joseph Stern, called the ruling in the case barbarous. Sotomayor's warning ominous, and her criticism of Kavanaugh one of the most savage passages she has ever written. The U.S. Supreme Court now has made it emphatically clear it is an activist court, and settled law is fair game. So civil rights activists and American people who value their rights, consider yourselves warned. So a little bit of background on this. And this is according to an article, mostly according to an article from the New York Times written by Adam Liptak. Basically, the Supreme Court ruled that judges need not determine that juvenile offenders are beyond hope or rehabilitation before sentencing them to die in prison. The decision concerning a teenager who killed his grandfather appears to signal the end of a trend that had limited the availability of severe punishments for youths who committed crimes before they had turned 18. Over the past 16 years, the court, often led by Justice Anthony Kennedy, methodically limited the availability of the harshest penalties for crimes committed by juveniles. First, by striking down the juvenile death penalty, and then by restricting sentencing of life without possibility of parole. In this case involved Brett Jones, who had recently turned 15 in 2004, when his grandfather discovered his girlfriend in his room. The two men argued and fought, and Jones, who at the time I guess was making a sandwich, then took a knife and stabbed him 8 times and killed his grandfather. In 2005, Mr. Jones was convicted of murder, sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Then the mandatory penalty, which was then the mandatory penalty under state law. That same year, the Supreme Court ruled in Roper versus Simmons that the death penalty for juvenile offenders was unconstitutional. In 2012, in Miller versus Alabama, the court extended the logic of the Roper decision to ban mandatory life sentence without parole sentence. To ban mandatory life without parole sentences like the one imposed on Mr. Jones. The decision repeatedly criticized mandatory sentences, suggesting that the only ones in which judges could take account of the defendant's age were permissible. In Montgomery versus Louisiana in 2016, the court made the Miller decision retroactive. In the process, it seemed to read the Miller decision to ban life without parole, not only for defendants who received the mandatory sentences, but also for, quote, all of the rarest of juvenile offenders, those whose crimes reflect permanent incorrigibility. After the U.S. Supreme Court's decision in Miller, the Mississippi Supreme Court granted Mr. Jones a new sentencing hearing, but the trial judge resentenced him to life without parole without saying in so many words that he was incorrigible. Because of the ruling, Jones, now 31, will have to wait until another 29 years before he has the hope of being released from prison. Under state law, a prisoner sentenced to life without parole has to wait until they turn 60 before they can become considered for a conditional release. Jones was not appealing the 2005 murder conviction, which has been upheld by state courts. Instead, he was appealing the sentence of life without parole. A ruling in his favor would have set a legal precedent and changed the way young offenders were sentenced when charged as adults. So you guys, is this, I'm afraid this is a sign of decisions to come for the obviously right-leaning court. So what are your guys' thoughts?
Yeah, just incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, like, obviously it's disturbing with this case, but precedent now has no meaning with this court. What's next? So you have to wonder if LGBTQ rights are going down the toilet. If Roe v. Wade is now going to be torpedoed, you have to wonder just how far this is going to go. Yeah. So that's what worries me now.
Well, and of course with juveniles, you're not, you just think about it. That if he wasn't a hardened criminal, he definitely now is with his, being in prison for almost 15 years. And there's mental health aspects here that aren't being addressed for young, he just turned 15, and it's just, again, putting them in a prison with men is not probably what they need, no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Tim. I mean, having those mandatory minimums in almost any case is just, it's just outrageous. I think it's a poor use of the justice system, and it really does put punishment over rehabilitation. And I think, like you said, I think mental health has been a big concern in a lot of these cases, and we're not addressing that. We're just kind of pushing all of those things to the side and saying, oh, you made a bad choice, you did a bad thing, and so you're a bad person and you're going to be locked away forever. And I can't believe that even the majority of cases are that way. I think we have to find some humanity here, and I know that there are bad people. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think we all know that there are just inherently bad people, but I don't think that's the majority of people who commit crimes. And I think that if we gave people the services that they need, whether that's helping to find a job or addiction help or mental health, I think we would see just so much better results. And that's going to be better for society as a whole. So I don't understand why we're just saying, oh, you're 15, you did something bad. We don't really know the context, but boom, you spend the rest of your life in prison without the ability to show that you have gotten better, or that you have understood and learned from your actions. I just don't agree with that.
We haven't even looked at the environment that he was, that led him to that point too. And that's a lot of the problem, is that kids are in these bad environments that lead them to these destructive behaviors. And we're not
look at issues. Look at the girl that was just shot by cops when, because she was fighting with people. It's just insane. Like I think the justice system in general thinks that they have the power to just take someone's life away from them because they feel like it, because, and it's like, I don't know. I think it's sad, and I think it's a abuse of power, and it's terrible that people are upholding these types of decisions.
Yeah, well, you had I know there's examples of the 3 strikes rules, where you have people that their 3rd strike is something. The harsh penalties are not deterrents, and that doesn't deal with the problems that lead them down those paths. And
that's been demonstrated over and over again, especially with the death penalty. I mean, the death penalty is clearly not a deterrent.
Yeah.
No no one, you know, you're not even if you're ready to commit murder, you're not worried about the death penalty.
Years anyway.
Oh, we hear you, Tracy.
Hey, we got you, Tracy. Go
Back.
ahead.
Yeah, I'm on my phone and the laptop at the same time. We're gonna see how that goes.
So far, so good.
Yep, working okay.
I think it's attracting more gnats though.
I have to get you one of those fogger sprays.
A screened room. The other thing too is, you know, when we're talking about it with our the story as far as you know, the protesters running into protesters, and that ended up in the Supreme Court. Who knows where they're going to rule on that? You know, it should be obviously unconstitutional, but with this court, I don't know.
Exactly. So that's, you know, that's just yet another reason why that filibuster has got to go. And we have to expand the court to 13. I mean, this court has to become balanced again. I mean, it is completely out of whack right now.
I mean, it's just kind of scary, really, how, I mean, on one end, they're saying that people can just run people over if they're, you know, feeling threatened or whatever. On the other hand, you know, a child can kill somebody, and again, we don't know the context really, and no chance, and you get absolutely no chance to live your life after that. So it doesn't make any sense, and it's obviously racist. I mean, it obviously is biased against poor people and people of color. I mean, that's
Yeah. Yeah,
that's
I mean, when Obama was president, I was having a conversation with one of my conservative friends. And yes, folks, I do have conservative friends.
you don't need
But anyway, his sole concern was gaining control of the Supreme Court. He could have cared less about anything else, anything. That was his sole concern. And so now he's probably, I haven't talked to him for, you know, 2-3 years, I suppose, ever since I retired out of UNK. But I'm sure he's just ecstatic with the way the Supreme Court is now. And I'm sure he spends sleepless nights worrying about the expansion, which a bill, by the way, was put forward in the House of Representatives to do just that.
Good.
So we'll see where that goes. But anyway, yeah. So let's keep our fingers crossed, and hopefully we can do the right thing here. And like we talked about a few weeks ago, let the majority rule for a change. You know, let's get rid of the filibuster, do what we need to do while we're in charge. Yeah. So anyway, Tim, thanks so very much for that story, and we will be right back with our crazy story of the week.
I'm feeling so hollow. Don't you know? Don't you know? I'm living in shadow. Don't you know? Don't you know? I fell for fool's gold. I fell for fool's gold. What did I know? What did I know? I fell for fool's gold. I fell for fool's gold. What did I know? What did I know? You were fool's gold. Yes, I did.
Well, just when you think we have put to bed the theory, quote unquote, of acquired characteristics, suddenly we find out it's alive and well again, at least with anti-vaxxers. Or perhaps they watched The Island of Dr. Moreau one too many times. If you've never seen The Island of Dr. Moreau, go watch it. Especially the original one with Burt Lancaster. That, in my opinion, is the better one. But anyway, if you're not familiar with the story, go look it up, and you'll get my point here. So the conspiracy theories know no bounds for the anti-vaxxers, but this one takes the cake. Tracy has our crazy story of the week. So Tracy, what is the latest vaccine conspiracy that has anti-vaxxers so worried?
Sure. This story was found on rawstory.com, published on 4/20 by Travis Geddes. Anti-vaxxers hysteria hits new heights. COVID vaccine turns you into a different race.
Tim, you don't seem to be any darker.
No,
I seem to be okay.
I might be.
Why does he have to be darker?
Well, I mean, could be whiter, I suppose. Yeah,
Could be an alien.
Darker?
lighter shade of pale.
I'm now Canadian.
Canadian, not you are.
Hey, take off, you hoser.
Sorry, Tracy, go ahead.
Anti-vaxxers have been sharing memes and other promoting bizarre claims about COVID-19 vaccinations cause genetic modifications, mostly on misinformation channels such as Telegram, but also on more popular platforms like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, reported the Daily Beast. People who are vaccinated will have modified DNA, reads one meme, which compares getting the shots to breeding with sheep. DNA passed on to the next generation. The risk that your children will marry into other cultures is possibly now shadowed by the fact that your children may marry into a COVID-vaxxed gene group, potentially shortening their lives and that of others.
Wow.
Oh
We need
my
better
God.
warning labels.
He married someone who was vaccinated. One prominent Telegram user who shared that meme made even more lurid claims about vaccine recipients. They're now genetically modified humans. That user posted in a community chat last month. They're not even technically human anymore. Vaccinated people are honestly a threat to humanity as a whole. The claims have been circulating since last year when the vaccines began receiving approval for use and are rooted in earliest fears from the 19th century about injecting scientist-created materials in the human body and mistrust in experiments on human DNA at the end of the last century. Only vaccinated people will marry each other, while non-vaccinated will also get married. One Redditor wrote earlier this year, it will split the human race into a fake race, the vaccinated race. Where they'll be.
Just let natural selection weed them out.
Right.
Yeah, Abby, since you've got an upcoming wedding, I imagine you've got to be aware of this story here. So pay attention.
Are you both vaccinated?
No, oh my God, I'm one of those people. I'm vaccinated and Eric is not.
Oh, you're gonna
Oh
have
my gosh,
hybrid.
a mixed
We're gonna have
marriage?
That's a mixed marriage.
We're gonna have we could have
There.
hybrid children.
Oh my God.
Hybrids. They're gonna be hybrids. I
Yes.
don't even know what's the races?
Everybody on the air, like you're gonna get death threats and everything.
Is it
Okay.
is it gonna be illegal soon?
I don't think you can get a marriage license
the
hybrid as a hybrid.
yeah, oh my God.
Hybrid.
We're gonna be shunned from the community. Shit.
Your grandmas are gonna be so mad.
Shit. Oh wait, my grandma's dead. It's fine.
Okay. Oh,
Good. Good. I'm so glad.
That was bad. Sorry. That was bad.
The vaccines use genetically engineered components to trigger an immune response that can later help fight potential COVID-19 infections, but none of them interacts with or changes human DNA. See, anyway, the vaccines could even unintentionally cause genetic changes, said Paul, a cell biologist and genetics researcher at the University of California, Davis. It's just not going to happen. That's the end of the story. Okay, we've already been talking about it, and what do you guys think?
Gosh,
Are you guys gonna mix your
Did it allude to where the
with the other?
origin of this lie came from? Was there a source to the origin?
And are you
well,
gonna,
I can remember seeing in my some of the immunology textbooks I used to have. They showed Jenner, administering the initial cowpox vaccine,
Right.
for smallpox.
Yeah.
And the cartoon
Yes.
showed this lady with a cow's head growing out of her arm
Yeah.
where she was vaccinated with cowpox. So I mean, this notion has been around in essence since vaccination started.
Right.
And of course, vaccination comes from the word vacca, which means cow. So it's Latin for cow.
right?
Yeah. I show that editorial cartoon from back then, and it has, yeah, like you say, it has the woman being injected, woman like giving birth to a cow, and just all kinds in the background there. All these
Exactly.
People are only gonna they're only gonna be friends with people who are either vaccinated or not vaccinated, and they're not gonna hang out with.
Well, I'm sure you've heard the big uproar about the vaccination passport, so that'll go along. You can't be together in the same room unless you show your vaccination passport. Won't be able to-
I have mine if you guys want to see it so I can stay on the show.
All right, I've got my card too.
Run in the house and get my wallet.
Yeah.
Honestly though, the pharmacist who gave me my second shot, he said like keep it. He's like, don't, make sure you're carrying it around because people are probably going to ask for that. And I'm like,
Well, I'll tell you who doesn't want it, and that's our own dear Governor Ricketts. He said that no way is our vaccine passports going to be used in Nebraska. So we're safe from that, thank goodness.
Vaccination discrimination.
So you don't.
It's just unbelievable
do you think
politicized this is.
do you think maybe he's gonna not let vaccinated people in the state though? Like that could be good too, right? Like he could use it the other way.
That would mean half of us have to leave right now.
Well, I bet isn't he vaccinated? I don't know if he said, but I would
I think he is vaccinated.
imagine he is.
Well, yeah, but he
Which
can leave. That's
I'm
fine.
all for him leaving.
Yeah, same.
So, what about and this is kind of, I guess, off topic a little bit, but so he would stop the university from mandating UNL to mandating everybody has to be vaccinated to go to UNL because
it's not that way. It's my understanding that he quote unquote, and whether this is real motivation or he just wants to oppose Biden in some way, which is what I think he's doing.
Probably, yeah.
Whether his motivation is really one of HIPAA, shall we say, keeping someone's medical records private. That's ridiculous when it comes to vaccination, because students already have to prove they're vaccinated against other diseases.
Right.
How is coronavirus any different other than this has been directed under Biden's administration?
Right.
That's a good
So,
point.
I again see this as pure politics.
Vaccination discrimination.
Have you heard? I've heard some rumors that some of the stuff these, like the Second Amendment, safe state, and all, some of those things are him maybe possibly making a run for the presidency. So wanting to favor, stay in the good light with the Trump screwed up base.
Cotton.
Yeah, could be, but I can't imagine who would vote for somebody named after a disease.
Yeah.
So.
And he get his, make sure he's having his vitamin C, eating your fruit.
If only we had a vaccine for rickets.
Yeah.
God, if he ever becomes president, oh my man,
That's why I keep my passport up to date if I ever have to leave the country.
Yeah.
That's what we
Right.
said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's crazy. You guys are, I mean, Tracy, you
Yeah.
need to be concerned if Ricketts you need to tell all your friends if he runs for president, he's a no.
Oh, no.
Not vote for Caillou.
It'll probably
No.
Ben Sass too, looking at running for
I'm used
president.
to saying
Yes,
no.
Well,
No.
Sass stunk himself with the right wing of the party. I mean,
That's true.
he has no chance now.
That's true.
But unless he would wake up and go, get to the enlightened side and
Right.
become Democrat.
But yeah, I mean, Sass is one of those moderate Republicans still. And I mean, I was impressed. I wasn't a Sass fan. And if you've ever seen any of his political ads, they are like they make you want to puke. But
Yeah.
some of the things he's
Yeah.
done recently have been like, okay, you're not completely stupid.
Yeah,
That's
well,
cool.
It's the old adage
not
of taking
completely
two
stupid.
steps forward and taking 2 steps forward and 1 back.
Mhm.
He doesn't get very far with his policies because he constantly has to walk them back to keep himself in office. Well, Tracy, excellent, crazy story of the week, and that
Thank you. I
audio
have to
system.
myself.
Audio system you got going now is working great, and we can see you while you're giving your story too. So that's awesome. So keep that going.
All right.
All right, that will wrap us up for this week. If you've enjoyed our program, please pass the word to your friends and associates, believers and non-believers alike. Again, just a reminder that you are welcome to post questions and comments on our Facebook page. Remember, there is an enormous difference between having good reasons for what one accepts to be true and having bad ones. Incidentally, this is the only distinction one needs to become a strict atheist. This has been Dr. Brad for Abby, Tracy, and Tim saying so long.
Yeah.